Hi, I'm Sir Micolay, and I make stuff. This video, I'm going to show you how I made this small, I call it a brooch knife, because it would hang from a turtle brooch that I made from my sable swap project. And this is kind of a how-to video for this knife.
The material for the blade comes from this old circular saw blade, which is already hardened and will keep its edge as long as I don't get the blade too hot. I cut the rough shape with an angle grinder. And then this is my belt grinder, and I will use it to profile the shape here. Pardon the shaky camera work here. I'm getting used to working while I record for the first time. You see me dipping the blade in water. That's to keep it cool so that it doesn't lose its temper. Here you can see the original plan for the handle was a piece of antler, but it was that didn't work out. You'll see why later on. Now I'm just grinding the tang into shape roughly here. This brooch knife is roughly based on sacks, Viking sacks, and those all had a hidden tang. So where the tang, or a whittle tang is sometimes called, where the tang does not go all the way through the handle, and you cannot, it's not peened over on the end. Here I'm taking a drill bit that is the same thickness as my material, or really close to it, and I'm using it to scribe a line along the edge of the blade. I want a line to be in the center so that when I grind my bevels, they're symmetrical. That mark makes a line, and I basically put some Sharpie down on it, and it scratched some of the Sharpie off. I flip it over so that I get the same distance from each side, and now I have a line right down the center of my material. Here I'm actually grinding the bevels in. These are a fairly flat bevel. There's a little bit of concave to it. I decided to put on the end. I think it looks a little bit nicer. Traditional saxes would have had a flat bevel, which means that or a concave bevel, which means that the whole knife gets thinner from the spine all the way down to the blade edge, or to the sharp edge there. I keep having to dip it in water to keep it cool, to keep the edge from getting hot. This is some brass I'm going to use as bolster in between the handle and the knife blade. I'm marking the size and the center of it and how thick of a hole I need for the tang to go through. Here I'm going to drill a couple holes out in the brass for the tang to go through. You can see the holes already drilled through, and now I'm going to use some files to enlarge in that hole so that the blade or the tang will fit through. This is sped up to like 8 speed, so this does not go nearly this fast. And it finally fits. I want the shoulder of my blade to sit flush with the bolster, and cutting it on the grinder, it was not even. So here what I'm using is the lips of my vise. It's kind of a file guide. I'll file down on both sides of the shoulder so that it's nice and flat, so that when the brass bolster sits on it, it's flush all the way around. Now I'm going to cut the bolster out. I'm just using a Dremel cutoff wheel.
So when I cut this piece out, I didn't get the hole centered. Well, I didn't cut out the piece uncentered around the hole. So then when I put it onto my piece of bone here, and I'll line the bottom up, and line up the top edge here, I guess, in the center, you can see that it's not wide enough. So I made a new one. I didn't record this one. It's the same process. I just made it significantly bigger, and it definitely does. So there you go.
Here I'm using my bench press and a vise to hold the antler, and I'm drilling the hole for the tang out. You can kind of see in this picture I'm wearing a respirator. Antler makes a lot of dust there that's very harmful to breathe, I guess. So yeah, safety first. I use a combination of drilling and then filing and then trying to get the piece to fit, and back and forth several times before I get it to where the blade will slide down into the hole. You don't want it to be too loose, but you don't want it to be, it has to be able to go. So I basically start by drilling 2 holes down on either side and then cleaning out the material in between them with either the drill or a file or a whatever I can find. Here I'm going to try a trick that I use in when I make a wooden handle. It doesn't end up working here, but the idea is I'm going to heat up the tang really hot, and I'm going to burn it in to set it into the right shape for the handle. This works really well in wood. It doesn't work very well in this, and it smells bad. So the idea here is I'm heating just the tang up, and the rest of the metal is held in the vise, which hopefully is enough of a heat sink that it keeps it from overheating and losing its temper. You can actually see that the temper never goes down into the blade by watching the colors change of the metal. That gives you an idea of what the temperature of the metal is, and as long as that color change only occurs on the tang and doesn't happen on the blade, it's okay. Here I'm going to try drilling it out some more, and you'll see what happens right here.
Okay, so here is what happened. As I was drilling through, the angle got off and I poked through the side here. I guess as I was coming down, it started to drift this way, and it popped out right there. So that doesn't look very good. So we're going to come up with another plan. I really like the antler look of this, so I'm going to stick with that. So here is the new plan. We're going to have a knife blade with the bit of metal bolster. This will get it to fit all the way. We'll use probably about this much of it. We'll cut it off there. And then we'll make the rest out of this. I think this is hickory. I've got a chunk of that. And we'll finish the rest of the handle out with that. We can carve all those things and it'll look good. So that's the new plan.
Here I'm just cutting off the messed up handle to be just a piece of decorative ivory to use on the new head. A little bit of time has elapsed, and so you might notice in some of the pictures from here on out that my right thumb is broken and my right hand is in a cast. So I'm a little bit fumbly with this because I'm right-handed, and so you'll see me messing lots of stuff up, but that's what that's for. Here's a crosscut sled on my table saw I'm using to cut the wood for the handle. Here I'm drilling the hole for the tang in the handle. This goes much quicker and easier than the bone does. And so that's all the pieces that will go together for the handle. I marked the bolster with the black Sharpie there on either side, and I'm going to use my grinder, which works better for removing metal, to get it closer to the right shape before I glue it up. We're going to do something, I think it's called a slop fit up, before we finally finish it. And what it basically is we will glue everything together. Let me tell you what I'm doing here real quick. Right here I'm drilling some holes, some little divots, they're not quite holes, into the brass bolster and to the antler and into the wood. And this gives a little bit more surface area for those pieces to mate up to with the epoxy. So here I'm going to use some epoxy and some paste wax to do the slop fit up. And what this does is I coat the blade in the Johnson's paste wax, and then I coat the tang in the paste wax, and then I fill the handle and epoxy it together normally. And what this does is it fills all the voids in all of the materials and makes it to be the exact shape of my tang. And the epoxy basically just fills in and makes a mold essentially of the metal piece. And then I can let it dry up or set up over a couple hours and then pull it off. The paste wax, it didn't come right away. I ended up using a little bit of heat here off camera to heat it up just a little bit, and that warms the wax up. And then when I come back to this, I can pop the piece off. And the handle material all stays together and it's all aligned and fits the tang perfectly, so that when I go to put it back together, everything will line up. Here I'm using my belt sander, which works better for wood and the antler than the other one does. It's hard to get an angle of what I'm doing here, but basically I'm taking the square chunky pieces of the handle and making them be handle shaped. This method of building a knife is called stock removal, because all we're doing is taking stuff away. And that's basically what we're doing with the handle here as well. Is we're taking pieces and carving away anything that is not a knife. The brass piece actually came off when I was sanding it, so now I'm going to use it on the grinder here, and I'm just marking about how big I need to cut it to get going, or to grind it to. So I'm marking with the Sharpie, and now I will use the grinder to get it to shape. I'm using the pliers because it's getting really hot. Now I'm just kind of grinding or sanding the shape of the handle, getting everything smooth between the 3 different pieces of the handle, the wood, the antler, and the brass. Now I'm using just some coarse sandpaper to do a little bit more shaping and smoothing. This is a buffing wheel. I'm putting green buffing compound on. I'm going to polish the bolster here. Now I've switched grits on the belt. This is, I believe, a 240 grit Trizac belt, and I'm using it to start to smooth out the finish. I'll work up, I'm not going to show it all to you, but I work up through a 240. I started and did my shaping with a 120 grit, and then this is 240. I'll go to a 360, and then I'll end up with a 600 grit belt on the blade. Here I am polishing it after I did all that sanding to smooth it out. Makes it all nice and shiny. The blade's not sharp at this point. But here you can see on the tang, it went really quick there, but I filed a few notches in it. That gives the epoxy a little bit more places to go and more to hold on to after we did that slop fit up. But this is going to be the final fit up, so there's no paste wax on it this time. It's clean and ready to go together. Mix up some epoxy, and then we glue it all together. The painter's tape on the blade and the handle is to keep the squeeze out from getting onto the material. It just makes cleanup easier. And I'll put it in the clamp, and we'll let it sit for about, let it sit overnight, 24 hours or so. To clean it up, I'm using a little acetone. That'll get any of the resin or the epoxy that has seeped out. Makes cleanup easier. And here's the final knife. I didn't get to record the final finish up, sharpening, or finishing with the linseed oil, but I'm pretty happy with this, how this guy came out. I've never made a knife quite this small before, but it was a really fun project, and I really hope that my sable swap recipient appreciates it and enjoys it, and that she can use it for many years to the future. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Thanks for watching.